G'day humans, Chris Stead from Finder here, and today we're talking about Illuvium. Now this will be the first in a series of NFT gaming videos that I do. I have a long history as a video games journalist dating back to the mid-90s, and I've been watching the NFT and blockchain scene quite closely now for about 3 or 4 years. So we're going to dive into some of these games and see what they're actually like. I'm going to approach this from a gaming perspective because obviously we want to have fun playing these things, but obviously a lot of you are going to be into this film play to earn perspective, so we'll dive into the tokenomics as well. But let's start off by having a look at Illuvium, what it promises to offer. They're claiming it's going to be the first AAA game available in the NFT gaming scene. Look, I've heard that a million times before. I worked very closely with the indie gaming scene as it was burgeoning in the late 2000s through the 2010s. And man, I got told that type of thing so many times by developers. I've even heard it quite a few times from the NFT gaming scene in the last 2 or 3 years. But anyway, this is what they're promising with Illuvium, proper AAA gaming that's going to hit the mainstream. Let's dive in and take a closer look. So what's the premise of Illuvium? Now you're part of the intergalactic space fleet, you've crash landed on this planet and it's been ripped apart by some sort of cataclysm. There's radiation coming out of everywhere, oceans have swallowed up most of the land, and you've got basically these islands here and there that are being beaten down by natural disasters, storms and so forth. Now you've landed on this land and you've gone, well, what's going on here? And part of the goal is to solve the mystery of what's happened, but you also find these obelisks that have been built by someone who's arrived there before you, and they're scattered about the places and kind of cordoning off areas. So you kind of got to unlock these things to try and get to new regions, and part of the mystery is going to be working out who actually built these obelisks. But the main part of the game is the Illuvials. Now these are creatures that have kind of been, I don't know, like given some sort of magic abilities or godlike abilities by the radiation that's leaking out of the core of this planet, and they're wandering the land. And you're going to have to go in and fight these guys, catch them, and use them to build up your force and your army so that you can get into harder to reach areas of the planet. That is the main premise of what things are going on. Now you will be able to customize the look of your character when you're starting off, and you also do get a sidekick, a drone that you'll be able to have with you on your adventure. And these can both be upgraded, which I'll get into a little bit more when we talk about the gameplay. Now Illuvium pitches itself as an open world RPG, which is, you know, a pretty big genre to place yourself in. This is where we see the likes of the Elder Scrolls and Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher, these types of games. Monster Hunter is another good example. So that's what we think of when we think of an open world RPG. So you're looking at kind of large 3D world landscapes to walk through. It's all been built on an Unreal Engine 4, which is certainly capable of that type of experience. And what very little game footage I've seen at the start of October 2021 does show your avatar character, your customized character, walking around in a 3D space, running and jumping and exploring as you might expect from those types of games. However, the combat, which I'll get into in a bit more detail later on, is more tuned to the auto battler genre, which is kind of it's an emerging genre that started over the last couple of years. And we're seeing like Hearthstone Battlegrounds, for example, Teamfight Tactics, Dota, Underworld are in this genre and have been doing well in this genre. So I'll talk about the auto battler and how those mechanics work a bit in a sec, but just focusing on your kind of moment-to-moment gameplay here. You're exploring this world, you're able to mine in this world, you can mine using your drone, you can pull things out of the ground such as gemstones, shards. Shards are extremely important, I'll talk about that more in a bit. And ore as well. And these things can be used to basically enhance your weapons or build new weapons, craft new armor, enhance your existing weapons and armor, and so forth. You can also actually harvest the organics that you come across, so various alien-like trees and bushes and so forth. They can give you more limited time power-ups that you can actually give to your Illuvials in battle. For example, I saw one where you kind of pulled this poison goo out of one of the plants that you could then use to add an attack buff to one of your Illuvials in combat. Now, there are the obelisks that I mentioned before that are kind of around these environments. There's supposed to be quite a large varied amount of environments you'll come across. So far this has only been made available as concept art, and I don't put much faith in concept art at all. I want to see actual real game footage if I'm going to believe in it, but there's concept art showing a lot of varied environments. The only one that I've really seen in any sort of gameplay terms is kind of like a very barren, rocky island, which actually despite being open world, looks really quite linear and where you could actually go through it, but it was a very early version of that island, to be sure. Now, around the obelisks themselves, there'll be towns, little places that you can go, which are safe havens from Illuvials, so you're not going to get into any sort of combat there, but you will be able to craft your new gear there. So that's what they're mainly for. The obelisks are then used to fast travel between different regions. However, there is a cost to that, which I'll go into a little bit more when we talk about the economy of the Illuvium game world. Now, before we dive into the combat, let's talk about the actual Illuvials themselves. So Illuvials are effectively the Pokémon of this world. And this is where the play to earn side of things really comes into play, because you're going to be able to make money, theoretically, out of collecting the rarer versions of these Illuvials. Now, there are 5 tiers of Illuvials from what I can tell. Actually 6 is like level 0, which is part of the free-to-play side of the game, so you can just jump in the game and play without investing anything at all, and you can pick up a couple of little Illuvials that won't be worth much money. And then you can go through the various tiers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There may be more than that, but from what I can see from the current documentation, that's what there is. Getting up to various forms of power, strength, and rarity as you go up. Now, the Illuvials are broken into 5 different affinities, which are water, earth, fire, nature, and air, and 5 different classes: fighter, guardian, rogue, poison, and empath. Now, these can obviously be individual affinities and classes for each Illuvial, or you can actually, as you go up those tiers and get to the more powerful areas, you can get ones that could have multiple affinities or multiple classes, so they can get a little bit more specialized, a little bit more powerful depending on what you come across. On top of that, there's a leveling system as well. From what I can tell, there's 3 different levels that you can level through. So you level through from cubs up to deities as you gain experience in combat and so forth. So that adds kind of another layer to the way that these Illuvials can be, I guess, become more unique and more rare. Now, in addition to that, if you level up 3 Illuvials of the same kind to their maximum level, you can fuse them together and form a new variant. So every time you capture an Illuvial, you mint that NFT as a fresh NFT, and then when you get 3 of the same Illuvial level up, you can combine those, which burns those 3 minted NFTs and creates a brand new NFT that's a more stronger, more powerful version of that NFT. Now, the way that you capture these NFTs is with shards. Shards, I mentioned earlier, something that you mine from the world, from the surface of the ground, using your drone. However, the strength of those shards is random, and you need a strong shard to catch a strong Illuvial. And there's some monetization that I'll have to go through in a little bit about the way that you take these shards you get from the ground and cure them into a shard that can be used to catch an Illuvial. And then, of course, when you then go to capture an Illuvial, much like you do with a Pokeball in Pokemon, there's a random chance of that working, there's a random chance of that not working. And the chances of that is tightened by the strength of that shard versus the strength of the Illuvial that you're trying to catch. So, therefore, the game becomes a case of you trying to get ever more powerful shards, so you can capture ever more powerful Illuvials, so you can go into ever more stronger tiers of regions, so you can capture even better Illuvials, and that's kind of the core game mechanic from the way that they all work. To add an even extra layer into that, there's a random chance that when you use a shard, that it will earn an additional kind of cosmetic variant, which comes in 3 forms: shiny, rainbow, or hollow, and that's in increasing order of rarity. So you can even, once you've caught the animal in a shard, get yet another thing that accentuates the rarity of that Illuvial in the way it's actually presented in the shard itself. And the shard is kind of it captures it, kind of like a Skylander, if you remember the Skylanders. So that is how the Illuvial system works. And on paper, look, that's a pretty deep and compelling system. It's one that we know that works because it's worked so well with Pokemon and many other like-minded games in the past. So on paper, we do have the mechanics of a really interesting and evolving system. It's not clear at this stage to me whether or not when you fuse 3 Illuvials into one, whether there's a randomization process in that, kind of like what we see with breeding in other games. So is that going to create something that's more unique than what anyone else has, or is that just a case of getting something which is the same as what a select other range of other people get? Being that this is an NFT game, once users are playing the game and discovering these Illuvials, they will become harder to get. So, you know, if you go and grab 100 of one kind, or if gamers get 100 of one kind and there's only a pool of 200 to begin with, they're going to become harder to get. So that therefore maintains their value once you've actually got them. They've claimed that they're going to be 100 Illuvials at launch, which is a bit underwhelming in my opinion. By example, when Pokemon Sword and Shield released on Switch a couple of years ago, it launched with 400 Pokemon to collect. However, there are plans in place for new regions and new Illuvials to be added to the game in the future. And this is particularly interesting because if they don't get that right the way that they add them, they might end up annoying some of those early players who have already kind of leveled themselves up if you're starting to flood the system with new collectibles that people may want or value more higher. However, we have seen in games like Fortnite that people seem to always be hungry for more, so maybe that's not a big concern. Okay, so let's talk about the combat, which obviously is going to need to be a lot of fun if this game is going to succeed. Now, as I mentioned, this is an auto battler. It's also a random battle game. So I don't know if you recall the old random battles we used to see in the earlier Pokemons and Final Fantasies. A lot of the Japanese games used to use the random battle approach, which is where you're basically roaming through the world, having a good time, and all of a sudden, ding, ding, pop up, and you're in a fight. It's an archaic system, and I don't like it at all, but this is the approach they're going with in Illuvium. Now, then it moves into an auto battle. So this is different from what you might have experienced in the Pokemon games where you're actually kind of hands-on and deciding who's going to attack who with what power and when and so forth. With an auto battler, what you actually do is it's more like all the strategy comes into the way that you form your team. Now, they haven't specifically said, from what I can see, how many Illuvials you'll bring into a given battle, but from the screenshot it looks like 8. And the way that you set up that team is pivotal because once the fight starts, you stand back and you just watch what happens. And the battle unfolds driven by the AI. You're a completely passive participant just watching on, seeing if your pre-fight strategy has worked. So how do you assemble your team then? Well, getting Illuvials that have similar affinities and similar classes and putting them together has like an exponential buff process in it. So that's part of your strategy, making sure that you've kind of put together Illuvials that synergize well together and therefore accentuate each other's stats and make them more powerful as a group. You'll also need to think about obviously who you're facing and what their strengths and weaknesses are and how you can counter those with who you put into battle from your collection. In addition, your actual player character, your avatar, is also on the battle. You don't control them, they're just in the actual combat arena, and the weapons that you have and the armor that you're using and how you've potentially upgraded your drone as well with the ores and the gemstones and the various things you've crafted and created while you're in the towns then adds auras that further buff those Illuvials in different ways to decide who wins that fight. So that's how the kind of combat comes together. Now, if one of your Illuvials dies and doesn't succeed or gets knocked out, they are returned back to the shard and then have some time to recuperate back to full health. So you don't lose them, which is a good thing. However, there is a time delay there before you can use them again, unless, of course, you spend a bit of money with the game itself to give them a little jump start and get them further along on that health so you can use them again sooner rather than later. So anyway, that's a broad overview of how the combat works. So very strategy focused, not any real-time skill involved in it. However, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of random battles. I prefer games where you can explore and seek out these creatures, hunt them down, track them, Monster Hunter style. However, the random battle thing isn't such a big deal given it's an auto battler anyway, it's not real-time combat. And once you jump in there, the strategy of actually sorting through your Illuvials and cleaning that team up should be really engaging. Now, I do have to quickly touch on who is developing this game, and the developer itself has no name, which a lot of NFT gaming does this. The developer actually doesn't have a name, and I find it infuriating, and it's a bit of a red flag for me, to be honest. So when I dived in, looked there and had a deeper dive into who was in the team, It's led by Kieran and Aaron Warwick out of Sydney, Australia. So these two guys, they're brothers. They've started this Illuvium concept and then built a team around themselves. Now the problem I have with this is that Kieran is an entrepreneur, and Aaron, while he does, he's been a hobbyist coder for most of his life, from what his bio says, hasn't actually been involved in any game releases. So there's very little actual game development experience in the leadership group here. And there's also not so much even in the development, but even in the release of a game. And having spent years and years and years covering and working with indie developers, I know that this is a problem. But they're getting they've had such good success with the seeding and so far, and such momentum growing behind this game, they probably now have the funds to bring in some extra people, some people who have that kind of, I guess, skin in the game previously and have seen and experienced the highs and lows of game development. But that's not currently available on the team. Everyone I can see involved in the team, for the most part, has no significant game development experience. Nate Wells, who does have a long history in the gaming industry, is on board as an advisor / producer, depending on where you look on the site. Nate Wells is someone I have come across before. He's worked for Crystal Dynamics. He worked for Irrational Games for quite a long time. I've interviewed him a few times back when I was working on Game Informer and Game Pro back in the day. And he does know what he's doing, but I'm not sure how involved he is and what his capacity is. But that is something to be concerned of. Doesn't mean they can't create a great game. Doesn't mean that. But it does put a little bit of caution flag up there for me. Now, given this is NFT gaming, there's a whole other level we need to talk about on top of the gameplay, and that is the economy, the in-game economy, and how that works. So there's the Illuvidex, which is the marketplace, which has been kind of facilitated by Immutable X, which allows you to trade with other gamers using the ILV token. And this is where you're going to be able to trade or buy and sell the Illuvials that you capture. But on top of that, you also have the various things that you'll mine, the ores, the gemstones, the shards, and also the resources you've gathered from the organics, so little buffs you can put into the combat as well, plus any weapons or armor or things of that nature that you've crafted. So all of these things that you get in the game or farm in the game or otherwise acquire, you have complete ownership of, because they're NFTs, and you'll be able to sell to other players within that ecosystem for the ILV token. And that is the main way that you're going to find people earning in this game. There is a spin-off title coming to mobiles called Illuvium Zero. That's coming after the launch of the main game, and that has a whole different mechanic to it as well, where you can, it's a city builder, so it's a completely different style of game, but in that you can also build a city which then creates resources which can then be sold into the main game. And so that's a completely kind of side hustle that's been set up as well. But in terms of Illuvium at launch, those are the ways that you'll be able to earn money. Now, how much does it cost to play Illuvium? Now, there is a free-to-play level of this game where you can just jump on, pay no money at all. You don't have to get any ILV tokens. You don't need any Ethereum. You can just go in there, jump in, have a play around, get some basic shards from the ground, catch a couple of basic Illuvials, and just get a play for it. But if you want to step up to the tier 1 zone and then get deep into the game, you're going to have to get some skin in the game. Now, why Illuvium tokens are what is used for player-to-player transfers. For the actual player-to-game transfers, it's all done through Ethereum. Now, every single time you do a transaction in that regard, the game takes a 5% fee on top of that. And then Immutable X as well takes an 0.5% fee for anything you do on the NFT trading things. I should have mentioned that earlier. So that's kind of the base cost just to make exchanges and be involved in the game. Then there's things you can obviously buy. So there's shard curing, and this is the most interesting one, just because as I've gone through, shards are so vital and important to any sort of progression in the game. So when you mine the shards from the world, you get uncured shards, and you have to cure them. Now, they haven't said how much this is going to cost. Hopefully it'll be a minimal thing, it won't be too aggressive, but there's obviously some fee involved in converting those shards to a cured form so that you can then go and capture them. So that's an expense I think that we're going to have to spend a lot on if we want to really push forward in this game. Then you've got to pay for travel. Now, this one annoys me. So if you go to the obelisk and you want to go to a new region, there's going to be some sort of cost there to be able to go from that obelisk to the next obelisk, which opens up a new region. So Not too cool about that one, in my opinion. You should be able, at least be able to travel the world, right? But there's going to be some sort of cost there. None of these costs have been identified yet, so I'm not sure what they are. There's a crafting option, so you can obviously quick jump your way to some of those weapons and items if you don't want to do it the in-game way. There's cosmetics, so skins and so forth, ways you can dress up your avatar, probably your armor and so forth as well. So there'll be some, I mean, that's like the Fortnite model, right? You can just spend a bit of money there and get a really fancy look if that's your go. Now there's a real revival cost too, which I spoke about earlier. So if your Illuvial gets damaged and hurt, it goes back to your shard and it will heal over time, or you can expedite that by spending a bit of money. So they're the main ways that you're going to be spending Ethereum in the game world to play. Now what is particularly cool though with Illuvium is that 100% of that money then goes back into the community anyway. So if you're a stakeholder, if you've got the tokens, then you are going to end up benefiting anyway from that money that you're spending in some capacity, obviously reduced based on the amount of the stake that you have. My first reaction when I started looking at Illuvium was one of a bit hesitant. There's a lot of good ideas here, but there's so much of it that's just trapped away in concept art and pie in the sky thinking at this stage. What gameplay I have seen wasn't particularly exciting. Now there is supposed to be another gameplay video release in November of 2021, so perhaps then we'll get a better taste of what's to come, where they can actually deliver on what they're saying. What I do know is the game was supposed to come out now in October 2021, well, the open beta was, and that open beta has since been delayed to Q1 2022. And if the gameplay footage I've seen so far is anything to go by, there's no way they're going to hit that date either. So there's going to be a bit of a potential delay there as well until they get the game where they want to get it. However, while what I've seen so far has certainly not blown me away in terms of its current quality, the systems that they've set up in the way that the Illuvials work, the way that the kind of rarity trees branch out, the core gameplay around the combat looks really fun and should be deep enough to really keep people's attention if they can combine that with an exciting 3D world to explore, which is supposed to have a day-night cycle and all these big weather events. Then potentially if they can match those two things, and they do have the AAA game that they're pitching, but I just feel like there's a long way to get there at the moment. Now, if you check out the article I've written on the fine.com.au website, I've written a humongous article about Illuvium, and I dive into the tokenomics there, the DAO governance system and so forth. But what they've set up though is pretty good. And while I haven't seen such a strong development team there yet, Sydney, Australia has a very, very rich independent game development scene. There's a lot of talent here. And I do feel like now that they've got a bit of money potentially to spend in pulling some new talent in, they could swarm up that development studio quite quickly and put some real experience and talent in there that can help deliver on their giant goals. Definitely one to watch, there's no doubt about that. And if you were lucky to get in early when it was the seeding of just $1 per token, and you are a very lucky person. For the rest of us, just keep your eyes on this game and keep an eye on my channel as well, because I'm going to be going through all the other good NFT games and all the other exciting NFT games that are coming over the coming weeks and months. So until next time, see you later.